The Miracle Shirker by Brad Buchanan, read by the author. The birds and the bees are animals, no more than that. So saying, I ran upstairs to bed. I did not want to undergo the forced confusion of humans through whom elemental drives were aimed. The buds splayed on the lawn alarmed me, set off raging allergies, and I sneezed through each fevered May. In August, honeysuckle made a case for going back outside. By then, all vegetation had learned the trick of looking well-informed. The tree they planted by my window grew and embarrassed me with a flowery show of wooing, a serenade beneath description. I had to start with death and slowly work my way back towards a love that I could put into words. The flytrap offered its desires, and I heard buzzing sounds for years, but ivy soothed me. When I awoke, the language of flowers was tongue in cheek, and I had missed both the innocence of nature and its decadence. Toy Story. Something is gleaming in the dark. A mechanical ghost has gone to work, and the universe's antimatter has gathered into a single impermanent thing, a minor synthetic sun against which probing sensitive fingers are absolute darkness. The fist that covers this luminous toy looks like half-charred embers shot through with the glowing, unnatural light of a radiant birth that has come too late and shows itself only to overgrown children, transfigured, unearthly, where no one can see them. The fuzzy room. The pattern on the air grows thick with jagged static, then shrinks back to linear shapes. Chaos is evil and terrifies me. I live disheveled, semi-conscious, bedridden, anxious to negotiate the labyrinth while its walls are still defined before the undergrowth reclaims the quick escape routes, foxes the mind with split infinities, fragmentation, shortcuts to nowhere, pointless dreams. I hate the thought that I desire Baroque confusion. I am 10 years old in the fuzzy room and despairing. That was now, and this is then. The Kindest Cut. Maybe it wasn't my first haircut, but close. They brusquely grazed my blonde head a little too sharply. Had to get astringent tissue to stick to my blood. Their hairspray dried to a feathery scab before I healed. The friendly tingle of ointment on my neck, the rub of their salving fingers shaped the pang I feel. In front of each double mirror, they might have imagined, could not have foreseen the length of that stinging. The boy who was fairer than anyone is now just a man. The siege of the imaginary treehouse. Fatal arborists, woodpeckers bored, burst like fireworks. Branched out, began the great siege of the imaginary treehouse. Maybe its absence brought more light in, but I knew that old broken tree had deserted me. Where anything is forgiven but flight. Maybe another child might have straggled home by now furtively with twigs in his heart. But when it was gone, my windows were empty. No one visits me now with winged feet. Swing set. Cantilevered for a split second, we pointed like ballerinas. Legs held straight out, till having leaned back made us back away, and the next plunge forced us to pump our knees and hunch up, fetus-like, gathering force for further advance. We retreated, forgetful, reversed momentum, and gained an upright safety, coiled, then, having swung to and from the womb, reared for an escape, and let go as the peak was still ahead of us, dreamed a parachute to soften our landing, found sand, sprawled a new start, a new history of the Dogon star. A black meteor over the twinkling plain, it was traced and vanished long before our eyes. In 60 years, when it had returned to its first amazing place in their minds, they knew its orbit, its dense, dead shell, which they masqueraded. They still sow by its dial, where its paths on their walls, while ceremonies reap grain from a mill on a fabled galaxy's prophetic scale, on which suns were balanced, moons suckled, and lifetimes described completely. A child takes an unforeseen bus to school, changes the world. The glue eater. I ate glue scribbles poured into my desk. They simmered slowly, like snot and bone bisque, to a neutral flavor shaped overnight that sometimes took the paint with it. Mucilage, appetizingly named, and in a pot both nippled and round, was a palate smoother, like a protean thumb, scummed somehow with unspeakable film. Tastes stuck with me in those days. The whinge of mustard burned me for meals at a time, and the sour placebo of classroom bonds made everything new, permanent, and my own. They couldn't bribe me to let go of the torn yellow blanket cover that smelled like my dreams, until I discovered the go-between of glue, partly me, partly something to learn. The backyard wars. The backyard going on battlefield played host to the plastic cap gun wars that lasted till evening. All our fears were real as we crept into window wells behind the pool, blushed madly in bushes, flushed out dusty girls, forced them back over walls, and surrendered them gallantly to dinner. Our double-crossed cousins attacked neutral neighbors, plotted the overthrow of teenaged lovers. We drifted like spores and took root, held our fire and stemmed our excitement. The eldest disarmed me when I had grown tired and felt strangely friendly. Flattery, he said, will get you nowhere. My compliment had been an adult one. It might have even seemed the true danger. We smelled Armageddon in new yearning odors. Before we finally went in, the damp powders we hid in our armpits were salt, sultry traitors. Our hands were perfumed with spent, pollen-shot flowers. For the class of 2000's clown, cup your hand to your underarm and flap your skinny chicken wing to make a sweaty, squelching sound. Pry your friends' noses, stick your thumb between two fingers, note their alarm. Throw your elbows up, pressed together, and watch your spun wrists circle each other in a wholly implausible manner. Let the wave run up your shoulder and down to your toes like nausea, then step it up. See it get passed on to the next automatic class clown. Bulge your cheek out with your tongue as you jam an invisible cylinder in, ruder and ruder as you get older. Your wife, the prestidigitator, plays the winning trick of sex, turns your changed body into a father. Aquaphobia. Gritty placenta between my toes, I go no farther than my knees in the native lake, which remains too cold, too dark. I only fathom an obvious plot against my self-consciousness. When you look bad in a bathing suit, you tempt the monsters of the deep to take your infant body back. Undercurrents of regret, tumor-like, sprout hair and teeth, cast their hooks into rolls of fat, reel in a self monstrous, an adult. Why I am a carnivore. Before the teenage shark attack and the conscious urge to vegetate, my first fear was of being consumed by a plant's blind appetite, a trap that would digest me to petals, infuse white roots with my cutest blood. I knew the power of archetypes before I had opened a single book, saw salad for the very first time as a chance to lose what I'd freshly found. Jack was the beanstalk he mistook for an elevator. The greenhouse effect forced Dylan Thomas to die of drink. The knowing stem, the flowering mind, and the helpless leaves were terrible things, because they too could be human, though eaten without a second thought or a scream. Tomboy. She skated near and surprised me once, hugging me fast from behind, pinned my arms to my sides for a second. I turned and smiled that she thought I ought to be restrained, as though she should talk, like tomboys could protect someone else or themselves, except by growing out of their earliest urges, exchanging proud hearts for the loneliness of womanhood. I knew she and I couldn't be victims of adolescence and its stupid legends, and I didn't think our chaste certainties strange, because I was the real boy, too selfish to question. Parting. Time for one more hockey game in the snowy valley before the moon shines through and changes the playful light to stark assertions. I love you, but wait to say so. Measure myself against the gathering shadows. Parting. Time for one more hockey game in the snowy valley before the moon shines through and changes the playful light to stark assertions. I love you, but wait to say so. Measure myself against the gathering shadows. Just this once, the coast seems clear, the weather a powerful ally. Your friends approve and are careful to hide it. Dreams come true early this year, and twilight promises to endure my indecision a little longer. I shuck my footsteps as I skate, scrape the ice clean of the thought of shoes that I can't fill today, not even on this magic lake, or tonight by the fire where lovers lurk. No one ever gets older in winter or misses an opportunity. Innocence lasts until we die or are awakened and betrayed. I try to tell you of my dream before it ends, but cannot see that somehow love misunderstands itself and blames us differently. You with a woman's, me with a man's parts, playing for keeps. So long, suddenly. How I spend my summer holidays. Flashlights hold a brief sway in the dark. A procession of virgins at summer camp, staging their ignorant, evil thoughts, chinning themselves on their spotty lamps to seem gibbering demons. All at once, the illusion dissolves and flees into the forest. Then terror fingers them, conjures a dense shadow mocked into watchfulness. They think it best to keep to the straight paths and search for the truth of unselfishness with a childish faith that nature is still their attentive mirror. The batteries start to lose their power, and soon a brighter-than-bargained for star will be their only guide through this nightmare, or else they will simply grope their way to where the adults are waiting, unsure if they should have trusted these difficult boys with enlightened reasons to wander so far. A gangster's girl. She lies there, letting the photograph happen indifferently. Behind her bends an overgrown adolescent, grinning intently, dipping his needle into her shoulder, tattooing what he owns, her skin, her insistence that everything's fine. She raises her head, looks into the camera defensively, dully says, "All this is normal to us." She is shielding herself from the innocence that brings such scrutiny. There is no name to give to this image. She has declined to be interviewed. There must be worse things in her world than we can imagine by looking at her precarious beauty. The lines that thicken on her back as we look on must be obscuring some previous wound. Most women don't take sides in the gun battles that kill little girls in their rooms. Complicity must have more private reasons, though everyone wants to grow up and belong. In my wrong mind. "Love me," says the girl of my dream, crying tears of relief in my arms. Her narrow breasts just fit in my two hands. She's letting me know how plans have changed. She was the one my best friend wanted, while I had my heart set on her friend. But the women have made up their own right minds. Now they're anxious about the directness of their last-minute explanations, knowing that the words we expected coming from other practiced tongues suddenly need to be translated into sexual overtones. These fantasies about disbelief being lovingly overcome leave the loneliest grievance of all. You dream that when you wake up, they go on. The wake-up call. A moment of vindictive insight, and she shows you it's finally too late. Whatever you might have wanted from her could not be expressed as an honest desire and meant playing games. She doesn't have time for them anymore, and that's what she's saying. You need to keep everyone second-guessing because you don't trust them. Your pants are on fire, and you won't let anyone put them out. You'd rather burn and be polite. You'll never admit that you needed to hear her voice, her assurances, her concern. Then go home the way you came, alone. She's telling you this much by calling you names, by being self-righteous, protecting her own vanity from indifferent men who sometimes act like they love her, then run. The slowness of light. I hope your share of this generous night holds separate meanings that also suit an occasional cosmic awareness. The humans we've reached out to as lovers and touched, by whom we have been accepted even in our estrangements, seem to keep watch. The remotest points of unchosen existence assume a starry, vigilant shape, projecting the dated expectation that we will be happy wherever we sleep because we were worth loving once, and that assurance sustains a continuum, like that which shows us the reverent light of comets that long since left us alone. This immigrant language escaping from the populous and impoverished realm of childhood grows to a foundering claim on a prosperous coast. Memory bides its tongue in babble or neologisms of conquest, The terms of exile, place names we've only been a part of lately, become our home. Borders are subliminal zones, nostalgic, transcendent, where we form lines to cross over, look out on new lands that we cannot describe, despite many returns. The miracle shirker. Is it possible that all speech is a circumlocution, a way not to touch the forbidden, irresistible one who shows you yourself in unthinkable form? Or is it just me? Have my rodent hands been sat on so long that this helmeted mind thinks itself indestructible and necessary? A blinking machine postponing the critical miracle until its patterns are safely affirmed. The 5 chairs balanced in a room invite acrobats who never come. The unsealed ladder to the sky has been abandoned for privacy. The justified trajectory goes nowhere, carves out an inch of daylight unnoticed, after night has burned elliptical warnings into our minds. I will never know whether those flights to the sun would have loosened my feathers or just warmed my skin. Recovering. As if it were some sacred ground from which she once emerged scarred, scared to return, the woman upstairs paces around, high heels on hard floors, though she isn't locked in. The furniture seems to be arranged in the usual way, but she could be wrong, so moving in starts all over again. Each intentional footstep makes a new sound. The old occupant sleep is turned out. The dumb blind needs restraining. Acoustics remind her of friends. The downstairs tenants awake, drum their fingers where yesterday's welcoming gestures thin as the ceiling between them seems every evening when she stalks herself into corners, recovering. The other edge. You clung heavily along my body's ledge, 5 feet of toeholds, a ghost dug in. A bridge that nodded low, flailed lightly for a bluff. A far-off look, the long drop's other edge. But the spinning in my head was drained like distance during that dizzy climb. You said, stay and be stable, smooth the ridges of your muscles. Sleep well, dream little. Hang on, be hung on to. Don't look down and don't fall into anything alone. You pause. The dreams that were once my haunts are chasms. There's no telling where you went. Close encounters. A lonely Roswell of the soul. It doesn't need me, but appeals to the world. This is where she touched. She fell into a form that can be sold. Paperweights, travel documents, hints at higher consciousness, some plants to create a climate that can support her, a footprint frame, the blurred snapshot, glossed over in one's haste to invent, water weenies shaped like her glimpsed familiar body, virtual jaunts into the prehistory of our event, the pencil Tara McKinnon lent me, the first day of school when I mistook her for one more of the boys I thank for all the theories they construct about why she couldn't stay a plain fact. I know she never really called me from anything but her human world, and yet this shrine is genuine. She's out there, living illusions again. Pipe dreams. These are pipe dreams, but who can sustain the thought of paradise without stimulants? Death is the only perfectionist in this empire of senselessness. Body counts are the only census I happen to want. What's the point of staying fit We make cancer of water's miraculous filter, and insight boils over to arrogance. I'll take what I need to feel mortal and proud of it. Brilliant, obsolete, feeding perceptions and imagery into a scheme of abstractions, utopian ammo for all my addictions. The heroin garden. In a cement grotto beneath the freeway on-ramp, a man shoots up and the traffic passes. He slicks his hair back at an irrigation tap. A police car cruises below, with a shark's submerge warning crowning it. He doesn't flinch, but soon gathers his things, moves into the dark green cover he's chosen for this day's addiction, this sunny afternoon's heroin garden. A maze where the stone minotaur he's imagined can string him along, then corner and kiss him. He rubs his arm where the bite mark stings and where the beast's lips have left sugary stains. Double take on a rainy day. The haggard woman with the bloody mouth didn't seem to want my help. Still, I might have stopped. She sheltered in the pretense of waiting for a non-existent bus. When I circled back, conscience-driven in my dry, book-laden Nissan, she was staggering again, and I saw that she was insane. The blood was not a victim's, clean and terrified, a change reversible with time and timely sympathy, a wound visible in its livid prime. This was for the rain to cleanse, not for my strange hands. Pitying Nietzsche. An old horse staggers in Turin, giving up a ghost who would rather be born anew in another victim's bones. So pity befalls the Superman until the jaded rational mind snaps shut. The old horse lays its skin-tight death throes down, anatomizing grief for a thinker who could not even mourn humankind. So Nietzsche goes mad, far from homesick, syphilitic, craving returns to the eternity of the room where he met the prostitute who warned him of this final collapse, while her bare arms cushioned her slower, defeated consent to his enjoyment. We get what we want until we can't stand the sight of pain being taken from those whom it has renounced. The birth of a naturalist. The woman in the fake leopard skin coat, the huge pink shoes and the shiny pants, wears a cartoon band of flowers around her head, a garland from Disneyland. She's taken off her shoes to walk in dirty bare feet. She's fetched a book with simple pictures from her pocket. Her face turns serious, wrinkled, vacant. Suddenly, right where she stood, a huge crow chokes down a smaller bird, whose mate peeps harmless alarms. The God who watches this has substituted the natural for the human world, to everyone's dismay. We had voted to outlaw this homeless savagery. A bird returns to the same fatal spot, her red breast bustling, her swelling throat, a reflex without a coherent complaint. Now the woman has brought her shabby pace to drug dealers waiting around in a clearing. There is a brief, secretive embrace. The world has recovered its human bearing. A Nightmare of England. At the glittering dinner party, where the hosts are expecting the Queen, a ventriloquist abandons his dummy, who jaws about life's aches and pains. Mr. Logic's vulgar speech is technical and predictably wooden, so I find an available duchess with whom my wife invents conversation. The duchess explains why she tries to break her glass during toasts with a violent clink. It takes the awkwardness quite out of the social difference when I do it. My in-laws have reupholstered the furniture with an eye to the royal photographer, but nothing makes sense. The Alaskan king crabs we're having for dinner are still under wraps in a tangle of netting off the coast of the living room where they shunt new guests. All the well-dressed, wealthy people have faces of painted, withered apple, and England is one big obstacle course, not an ancient, but an elderly curse. Not if I see you first. My eyes and ears, you give notice that light is moon-colored this evening. The wet wind has stopped and clouds are no object. You tell me, look up and listen for more specific directions, as if we could fly to where your observations originate. What you describe makes a second sight more intense and more lasting than my own impressions. Reality tells me you're what I can trust. You make time for the senses to take, unrehearsed. One day I'll wake up and get a taste of unmediated experience, a sunrise that signifies undiscussed, but only if I don't see you first. Winter Song. Between life and death, I lay in the snow, being numb to both the then and the now. I waited for a single flake to descend in a pure state of grace. Nothing like falling on a human tongue to melt words into cold-blooded song. A woman's voice asked me if I was all right. A flashlight frisked me. I was prostrate, but the longed-for communion never came. The world stayed frozen. My breath stayed warm. The rack watchers. The scraggly skull of a half-buried dog. The whips of bulbed kelp. The muscles for miles, aiming their dried-up, translucent, whorled membranes at the sun. The persistent drag of the ocean on sand, of sand on the shore. This is the lens our planet grinds clear and clouds in a moment. The edges that clashed with each other now gently free bones from their flesh. This is the place where sperm turns to dust and back again, where old men fish and shift from foot to foot, but patiently, watching their other lives washing away. The diver. After the toe-curling nights on the bed, holding my breath till my head swam, and blood stroked its currents through temples, flooded the mind. With the airtight body's suspended demands, I was ready to dive. Hauling oxygen in slowly, filling my runaway lungs. With a last gasp of ballast, I broke the surface and let it reform as a barrier over me, vowing to swim to the other side and to return, all in the same breathlessness. Danger cooled the muscles that rode that urgent intention and shaped the smooth transition to submarine desperation. A U-boat crew screaming in my brain as I bumped the tarpaulin, ducked down again and reached ahead, gathered water and pulled myself towards open space. Panic and all hands trapped in a shaken, torpedoed shell till it surfaced, surrendered a world I inhaled at last, gulping air in painfully small emergency rations, heart yearning to bail. Before rain. You smell the rain and blame the ionosphere, not your upbringing, for the care your senses take of having been here for so many storms. I'd noticed nothing of the sort although I'd heard that some people spoke such words to the air and were soon all wet. We argue, settle for a lack of explanations for our difference, each one glad to have grown up, keeping our weathers separate. I still like the thought of no warning drops or telltale scent, just a blast from God, yet your certainty that there's a dusty, quickened bouquet before rain strikes me as equal cause for joy. One summer in suburbia. Daring to shower at night, outside and naked, to mistake myself for a nimble god, I track gravel I assumed I could dodge into the house. I return for a second thrill of mere human cleanliness, direct the hose to unregenerate armpits, faithfully spray behind my ears. I'll save my third bath under the unjudging stars for my earthier affairs, after sex has shed its tears. These neutral waterfalls restore the flesh's many selves, tell us what we would hear if the nights were cold. In the pillowed clouds, blood's own welcome interlude. Some droplets hold my fingered beard, like drippings from feasts of self-regard. The water nymph. Having come of its own accord through the city's tangled sluices and scaled the pipes in our backyard, to sit poised, tap-shaped, water refuses to go any farther until you beckon, melt the static, frozen river with a firm, expectant motion, summoning reclusive pressure. Even so, you delegate the steps from your deserted bed to the gusher. Water must be brought, carved out from the fountainhead, as though a formless stream might tease you into bathing, or a splash induce you to drink too deeply, souse your sanity, you water lush. The surf skateboard's break. The surf's skateboard's break is despicably neat. The chaos they skim off in speed should relapse, like all haphazard mastery. Bummed, the kid hops, feeling nimbleness tingle, the orderly steps thus avoided. In leaning, he turns, jumps, and claps his deft diving board down, and the sidewalk, waved, rocks like a puddle more muddied. The young girl he trips in front of gives a ripple of laughter, adapts, and they drift, whispering like two tides on the tips of Mack truck toes. They lap flooded streets, so relaxed. Idea of order at Ocean Beach. The dead gull rests an angelic shoulder on the sand, spreads its feathers wider, and opens its hollow breast out for a smattering of seething flies. A religion with nothing else to give may offer this selflessness and promise enough to keep you guessing. The ocean lulls you to walk a bit farther, where you find ancient embers smoking, like soft bones scattering salty carbon. Imagine a rankling, miraculous heat, as though from the waterlogged, fossilized heart of a gutted phoenix that could not be burnt all at once. On this beach, decay is a thief who finds his pockets have smoldered through on the morning after the sacred bonfire and the ritual evisceration. You leave the squatter's camp and the spot where the bird was crucified, miles apart and exposed to the northeasterly breeze, letting surf and highway mingle their endless movements and needlessly similar noise. picking fruit. An ancillary orchard on a barely profitable farm has pears for the taking and plums to burn. We stop here by ancestral right, unchallenged anyway by the help, and pick enough to fill 2 flats. You show me how. A felicitous culprit, you tug at the shape. If it's ready to part with its tree, with its taste, with the itch to rot, it comes off in your hand. You can't put it back, so if you don't want it after all, you release your grip. The round flesh will roll away by itself, ripe to fall, unchecked. I might do worse when I write this poem than to take your advice as I look for an ending and stretch the thought till it breaks, or not, at which point I will choose other fruit to take home. Japanese Tea Garden, Golden Gate Park. An Eden of juxtapositions. A little dark-haired girl feeding pigeons on the lawn, mimicking a parent's too predictably generous hand, is given a hasty peck and drops her peaceful bounty, creating a mob. A dwarf bonsai by a waterfall is a parable of serenity. A plaque offers her a more grave consolation. In 1942, the Hajiwari family was relocated to a different part of the country. One cannot live in a garden unmindful of wars which are bound to happen. Golden carp polish themselves in a pond like tarnished suns in a captive sky. Crayfish stick together in a muddy corner, wondering why they were ever set free. Tea is served in prophetic cups, fortune cookies gobbled between sips. These fragments prove the beauty of a long-suffering imperative. Cultivate your life for strangers to see themselves in, whoever they are. When you're gone, a reflection remains, clean but haunted, a clue to the nature of paradise, an ancient banishment reinvented. The Belly Dancers. Who knew that anybody could learn to belly dance in the heart of Midtown Sacramento? The finger cymbals clash in a regular, sensual tempo as a dozen or more assorted young women move around their navels, approach seduction with infinite reticence, turning together inside the windows of a well-lit store, watching the mastery of their frail teacher, an old lady in a gypsy headscarf. Who knew they'd pause to listen so blandly, their bodies waiting for the demand of rhythm to take them back in to an out-of-date, far-off embrace? Who knew they wouldn't seem out of place when the dance resumed? Who knew the mind was so easily charmed by awkwardness, craving this ageless release? Not one perfect shape in the place, yet such grace. Caedmon's Hymn Revisited. Every night a man walks by singing hoarsely, the notes a frayed and faded thread, tying speech to bad music, God to an ear-splitting world. His praise is a strain falsetto, wasted on incoherence, but none the worse for subjecting itself to this aimless abuse. He may as well stretch his hopeless voice too thin. His tone deafness will testify to something beyond him that he can see and hail from far off, that keeps moving away when he approaches it, desperately asserting absurdity's place in midair, the echoes of an unreachable star that strafe us with static as we near the silence that symphonies were for. A personal history of the harmonica. I forced myself to breathe through my hands because it was cold, and because this machine was to me what leaves are to the wind, fluttering, falling, flickering, failing to stay where they're kissed. I breathed back in and found my tongue could suck a square round. Now I wave a little goodbye to the sound as it escapes, oscillating but firm, and keep its precious wail for my own. A voice as fragile and eager as flame, wordless, half wheezing, as if the notes burned like cigarette smoke, succulent in the sun. William Butler Yeats in front of the wireless. An old man talking back to the sounds on the radio, mocked by his children and friends, but undaunted, pursues the living dream of an absolute yet responsive voice, a channel we can change by assuming its noises are ours, its powers our place. The bulky barometer of the mind sits high up on the mantelpiece, like a portrait of a relative we love despite his craggy face. Its readings blur if we deign to scream. It is almost like a microphone, but isn't. The ones who make their names by marshalling hard-won eloquence cannot resist the impulse to join the modern one-sided conversations and soon become ridiculous. It is old-fashioned innocence to trust a broadcast enough to waste one's measured and yet passionate breath defending a private version of truth. From a line by James Joyce. The starry heaven tree is hung with humid night blue fruit, and time is generous in this provincial city where smog and street lights do not form their own penumbra. This is a dream of ethereal plenty, hallucinatory confession of the imagination's absolute greed for celestial things and sly need for the sustenance of ordinariness. Not an ornamental moon in a river awash with lilies, but firm and fundamental pears, in theory as sweet as experience, bursting their frames with 3 dimensions to meet thirsting tongues. The dew will reach down to us here after 40 knowing winks. The eternal lawns of a well-cared-for, tolerant town show that drinking till we leave the party at 3 in the morning is good for the mind. And now for our resident genius's line about a Christmassy tree which the hoary sky reminds us of. When the warmth wears off, we breathe bittersweetly to find some clue that heaven knows our story and is prepared for us to transcend all but our appetites when we go home. The bird on the 3rd floor. Carlos and I have agreed that the bird must be here to stay, but neither of us wants to risk another word. Who can trust flightiness with advice or description? Whatever lured the thing inside to make its nest is past regretting, and nothing must change anywhere in this building. From now on, it will get where it's going with our help or our helpless blessing. The stammer of wings is still on our tongues as we check windows in spare rooms. The dip of a flitting but permanent shape that we have compared arrests our minds. We need there to be a way to escape the places imagination has tamed. A time and a place for everything. She decorates to permit desire some space to breathe, to find pleasure here when she does not share it, or when its impure self-consciousness pollutes the air. The walls are abstract. The objects are picked for their diffuse beauty. A vase of flowers radiates peace. A painting has plucked a few streaks of color, which must have occurred in a natural vacuum, a blurred reflection, which calls to mind her own passive stare. She is seen through everything in this room, including your motives. She lets them define themselves and accepts them as one more bloom in her hothouse gallery. Flushed with the sun, they are not fit to be acted upon. But when daylight is drained from the brilliant city, and art no longer consoles anyone, austerity risks being mere anonymity, and she is ready for love to unbend its quaint and menacing shape, to take prettiness prisoner in its own patient designs. My first Duchess. I loved you for the third person you were strangely eager to please, as if I weren't always judging, observing, as if there were more adult ways of escaping the fact of our estrangement. I strove to be similar to that vigilant other, who to always hear our voices raised and our vows unclear. I wanted to be the first to admire your friendships, mild, conspiring, and pure, to do justice to them, commit to the chore of not being the only controlling voyeur. I still miss the witnesses you sidled near, the self-absorbed performers, the choir of muted approval that you took good care to ceremonialize. Desire was hardly the point, and jealousies were beside themselves, though you kept score of even those. I liked what you spared me of your expectancy, and what you wore. The man who mistook his wife for a hat. You can and do leave your hat on while I linger on that silly detail. Why should a hat add a special thrill to seduction? It stands for imagination, a provocation so personal. It makes your whole body seem like a special designer's collection. The pubic bow, a witty gesture of self-presentation. The girl who wears a hat gets attention. You're almost a stranger in a bedroom fiction. Your cool flesh quivering with the intention of mixing novelty with abandon. The red brim round your ears, a disguise for everything but your aim to please. You could be one of a dozen women I have passed in the street this weekend. You wear it with ambivalence, as if you are ready to dress and go at any moment. Should the color of love be inappropriate, or this intensity cease to fit? Yet even in the worst event, if all should unravel and lust fall flat, you'll keep the good and bad under your hat, you seem to say, and will never repent. Discovering jealousy. How you lost your little red hat, I'll never know. A secret carelessness, perhaps. One of a dozen deliberate lapses of attention during one despondent day. Or a stroke of circumstance furtively stealing your love for illicit joy. Whether indifference, luck, or foul play was responsible, I made you cry, merely by mentioning that pretty thing, as evidence I'm not the only one whom details escape, who runs around, dropping unconscious amorous hints, then coming home full of remorse and romance. Soap opus. We save up the scum on the lip of each glass and scrape it together for a kiss. A toast to the party, and we slosh tongues over teeth. Clink, here's to flesh in its servant substances. China, washed enamel, bone, and the loving cup that holds its foam transparently. The martini groin, for which we carry a secret stem to raise when the dishes are done. Hephaestus to Aphrodite. Let the adulterate night descend, like a none too particular nude on an escalator, not shaken but stirred. Board a train that will take you deeper into the darkness. The comets that light your way home on this fitful sleeper are tricks of reflection. Don't look back. Adjust your eyes to the dimming chatter of people your own thoughts won't drown out. Picture yourself by a long-channeled campfire, warmed by the blindness of those who work late. Void where prohibited. Void where prohibited, this uninhabited ghetto has every claim to distinction. Its poems and fruit set out for inspection. Its family trees starred with crucifixions. A lucky few cursed it escaping. A warning crept into advertising. No one invents where they're not wanted. No gimmick works when it's being hunted. What the next contestant is granted will be denied to his descendants. Soon the cost will be too high. The fragrant pages put away. The trees scrapped for a newer legend. The stars woven into a different heaven. Void where prohibitive, the future reckons without those who have been abandoned to the experts' defenseless reasons or the expensive regrets of humility. We will not recognize the slogans we banished from speech and into memory. Lovers leap. The two people holding hands and jumping from the World Trade Center were rumored to be Americans going from death to death together. Perhaps they had already shed their skins inside the apocalyptic fire and knew that the other had changed and now that nothing would last forever. It may have been that they had gone through difficult times and wanted to shore up a relationship recently strained with a shared appeal to a higher power. Perhaps they simply found themselves on the wrong side of an unlucky floor, and a mutual need for a miracle burned the routines that trapped them in that tower. Whatever their reasons, we are stunned by the scope and suddenness of the terror that justified things they would never have done until banished as though they never were. A photograph from northern Iraq. The hills at night hold mysterious promise and call for an artist's expertise. Any fool with a camera can take pictures of dead Iraqis with passionate eyes, but I pause over the composition of this image. A fighter from Kurdistan, resting wakefully as the evening aims at dark night, expecting the bombing to start just far enough off to be fatal to neighboring enemies whose sleep is futile. A one-sided ceasefire that airplanes startle, terrorize, then annihilate. Peace is replete with landscapes, but few have such instant power to evoke the eternal conditions of war. A neutral planet makes us admire its indifference to us. Wherever we fight, and whatever art asks us to become traitors. The dust of convoys, the ambush heat, has settled in tree lines to wait for this hour. The fading light spreads an absolute cover of darkness that leads the dead wrong to defeat. And yet we prolong the sunset and wonder what dreams might conquer this holy dirt. After the victory declaration, the soldiers waffle between surrender and hiding out till this doomed adventure ends. The Americans complain that the Germans haven't heard the war is over. An elderly plane dive bombs a convoy of 1,000 well-spaced prisoners. A man hoping to sit it out for a day or two stains the cement. The calisthenics of not getting shot create an irregular heartbeat. A nightmare survives the ceasefire. Snipers retard the compromises of reconstruction, demanding to be practiced on by crack anti-terrorist teams in the name of professionalism. Nobody's ready just to be human anymore, and so the machines of Auschwitz are found clogged with cadavers who stare appalled at the helpless, unfamiliar bureaucracy of their rescuers. The funeral of the parish cook. As onions to the eyes and tongue, so are the words of God to man and woman till they understand each other's thoughts better than their own. An old man rose and spoke and sat, his lips falling over his teeth like slums around abandoned children, and his head was overwhelmed. His hair like a shredded scroll wore thin. A coffin slammed its shadow down. The gathered orphans heard him cursing. Something in him kept them fond, although they smirked a little knowing his breath was sickly and his eyes burned. Mission Nuestra Señora de la Soledad, founded 1791, restored 1955. Somewhere the ocean falls short on the shore. The passable soul froths noiselessly. The sun fails like a pirate's charmed doubloon. The host is gracelessly consumed. At Ave Maria starvation comes, though Christ's nibbled side promised affluent glands. A hobbled shape escapes its wounds, a savory festering God disowns, and scurvy, like a blasphemy against this arid, agreeable land, poses as imperial destiny, marooned in a valley too green for reply. His wardrobe. The vagrant angels of his wardrobe are prone and prostrate, shapeless cuckolds, frames of skin that, uncollected, slump in wrinkled attitudes. They are spread out like pelts let slip in traps, a feather-filled parka, fallen, faceless hood space down, is humped like a monk uncloistered, wintering in that basement. It hangs on that soft chair like a drunk lecher humored unbeknownst to himself. A weathered ghost hides in undignified postures, till the muffled clown is wrung by the shoulders, flung back by the neck, unloosed to dangle, the illusion of his head now gone. The lungs and arms that do remain are shrugged off, flattened. His vanished form thins out around it, is spread between the dozens of other things he's worn, into this orderly, borrowed range of fresh-cloned orphans, like people seen against his failing life, screens behind which shadows grappled, and faces leaned in to predict, bequeath, and blame Though I want no part of them, they've made room already. His nakedness in all but name has been proven unfaithful, the soul's cloak a sham. Tropic of Cancer. Just one more creaturely, featureless summer for most of us, yes, but for you it's forever that has been gained here by staying alive. That's enough to attune us to wonder in you. It may be that spreading blooms furthered your cancer, but something in you makes a truer response for the moment. To bask in a merciful weather is empty, but then even vacancies shudder from sheer, spared forgetfulness. Even the otherness in you creeps closer, heeds you, needs an answer, and that is when we two can speak, when your better death meets a worse nightmare in me, which you enter as if into pity for every new nature that doomed to the old dream of birth sleeps till winter. Drawing blood. Once the spice of violence, its richest sauce and rarest symbol, blood is now its own coup de grace, humane and unrepresentable. The experts who draw it from my arm do so calmly. A pinprick gleams briefly and dulls to a steady shine of nausea. Archaic pain suffers dilution, becomes a grueling absence of powerful family feeling. New blood, no thicker than water, cannot coagulate. The wounds stay wet despite their shallow accidental origin. I cannot stop the trickle of petty betrayals. Christ's own open wounds were a symptom of his faith in the human by itself, without tradition. We still draw blood from him to resign ourselves to his death while proving him wrong. The urban scarecrow's evening stroll. I found a dead rat in a trap of sorts, a scene set in a park between the slats of a public bench, its mouth wide open, hurt and pink, its body squeezed into a slit where fingers could not poke it out. I used a flattened, sharpened stick to ooze it loose and sweep it back into the bushes, where at least narrow escapes command respect. It was lifeless, and its shape was rotting already. It's been a week. Human cruelty should stink in human lungs. But now that I have come back to check, there is no sight or smell of it. These blackbirds badged with yellow and red, and feeding like insolent children, exchange dead memory for truth like gods who show what wooden revulsion brings. So life preens its dark, blazoned wings until our carrion dreams have fled. An Old Woman and I. An old woman and I, in opposed ballets of patience inside a revolving door, suspend a cylinder in time, pretend we're not going anywhere on purpose, though moving ahead all the same. Her wrist on the glass braces for being near me, not knowing that I too can wait here with no simple direction, no final desire from which I am being held back, that I do care that movement is more use together each year. One dizzying revolution less won't matter, and we are both too tired and far too practiced a pair of dancers to rush straight through this one turn that we've shared. That separate sleep. The trees stand tall at night, practicing the gestures that impress the moon. You tell me that the night before our wedding, I made noises like a forest storm. the lush rustling in my throat when I spoke my vows, the rain that swept my clouded eyes, had been subconsciously rehearsed, so you say. What watchfulness in that silent woodland did you mimic, staying close to those whipped branches? Did you perceive the prey of love burrowing deep or clinging wildly to shaken boughs? Was death that separate sleep? Consider the lilies. Consider the lilies, consider the ravens, your enemies, who can survive without striving and die effortlessly, abandoned like playthings, whose meaninglessness has offended you, whose thoughtless existence roots among branches and perches in water. Think of placid opposites who know no better, who take their subsistence before it's discovered, who carry it with them, whose aim is to scatter and splurge as they wander, upwind and downriver, whose urges are unsought and unfounded, over whose incomplete fates life is sloughed, then put on, like a final design on our flesh, soon outgrown. It. Sometimes our games of tag made room for a cancer amputee named Jamie. He dangled from one armpit and swung a crutch too late at the fleeting boys who went near enough to the home-free zone. Still, we took our lumps. There was no cast to sign, so we let the rubber tip of his aim leave its mark on us as we darted in and out of range, as though we'd been drawn by the vectors of healthy momentum. He was having fun, we were convinced, as we ran past, pushed each other close. Bald beneath his baseball cap, he whirled in pursuit of a shifting home plate. Too sick to be anything but it, in a swarm of playmates he couldn't infect. He hit out with one hand at the life that eluded him, laying the wood on, too hard and too seldom.